Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mary Beth Gauthier, and it is my pleasure to be your host today for this strategy update from the Principal for Queens. To begin, I'd like to acknowledge that Queens is situated on traditional Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe territory. We are grateful to be able to live, learn, work, and play on these lands. In a moment, we'll be joined by Principal Patrick Deane, who will provide an update on Queens strategy and how Queens is a university for the future. But first, I'd like to welcome Nathan Brinklow, Professor of Languages, Literature, and Culture, who will open our meeting today. Nathan?
Thank you, Mary, Principal Deane, for the invitation to share today. As I was introduced, I am Tyant Dahas, Nathan Brinklow. I'm from the Tyendinaga Mohawk territory, and I teach Mohawk language and culture here at Queens. It's our tradition to offer words of acknowledgement and thanks to open any important business. And so doing, we bring our minds together into one circle to work for common purposes. Since most of you do not speak Kanien'keha or Mohawk, I'll open this meeting in English and close the meeting in Mohawk so you have the opportunity to both hear and understand the words. To begin our time together, we bring our minds into one circle and we send our greetings to all of the people here today, to those who can't join us, to those watching later, and to those who continue to work together for the good of this place. We send our greetings to our first mother, the earth, and we acknowledge her for all of the things that she continues to give up of herself that support our lives, even as we don't always respect her the way we should. As we meet virtually in Kingston within sight of the water we call Nyat Dario, the beautiful, the good lake, we send our greetings of thanks to all of the waters that continue to move about on the earth. We send our greetings, our thanks, our love, our honor, and respect to all the things that continue to grow, the roots, the grasses, the flowers, the medicines, the fruits, the food plants, and the trees, that each continue to follow their original purposes and help and support all the life we see around us. We send our greetings, thanks, acknowledgement, and respect to all the things that live, the fish, the bugs, the land animals, the birds that fly, that each continues to follow its own purposes as we share together in this place, in this world that we've been given. And we look to the sky and we call to mind all the natural forces that have strength and power, the winds, the thunders, the sun, the moon, the stars. And we send our greetings, our thanks, and acknowledgements to each as they continue to do the work that they were given to do. As we conclude, we send our greetings and respect to the great powers of the natural world and the ways that each of us understand them, that hold everything together and that keep us moving together, keep us moving forward together. In pausing for a moment to send our greetings, our respect and acknowledgements to all of creation, we have opened our meeting with a good mind, in a good way, to accomplish good things. If there's anything I have forgotten, it was not my intent, as I've done the best that I can. Thank you now for your time and attention. Principal.
Thank you very much, Nathan. It's wonderful to be with you all this afternoon for this update on Queen's strategy. I have some slides that should provide you with a sense of where we are right now, but before I get there, I'll just recap what has brought us to this point. Members of the community will remember that beginning in, I think, the fall of 2019, in those days before COVID shaped our reality as much as it does, I began a conversation with the university about our aspirations and our values and where we saw ourselves heading and what we saw our purpose to be. And that process extended from the fall of 2019 into the fall of 2020. Even during the onset of COVID, we continued to meet and advance the conversation virtually. Then in October of 2020, I issued a report on the conversation, which was a summary, you'll recall, of things I had heard, priorities that had been underlined during the process of the conversation. And I also offered some very frank comments on where we stand as an institution and what we might need to do in order to address some of the challenges that we face. After that process had run its course, I then engaged on a continuing conversation with the university about, I suppose it was a way of just verifying what was in that report. I was eager to find out whether or not I had heard correctly, whether I was emphasizing the right things and so on. And it did appear that for the most part, the insights of the report on the conversation were borne out by the feelings and thoughts of people in our university community. And so it was through that process of verification, that we began to develop a strategic framework for the university. I presented on that strategic framework on a number of occasions, and eventually it was approved by the board in May of this year, May of 2021. So I'm now going to pick up there, go over again the components of the strategy, update you on what occurred after May, which is the period during which a number of working groups were established to address the strategic goals of the framework. And then I'll give you a sense of where we are now and how the process is unfolding, and how every member of this university community will have an opportunity to feed into it and help shape the implementation of the framework in the months and years to come. So, Keith, if you wouldn't mind moving on to the first slide here. Not seeing it yet, Keith. We're still on the title one. There we go. The strategic framework includes a statement of our vision and our mission. And just to remind folks on the call today, this is the vision as it was articulated in the framework approved in May. That the Queen's community, our people, will solve the world's most significant and urgent challenges with their intellectual curiosity, their passion to achieve, and commitment to collaborate. You'll remember that it was one of the recurring themes of the conversation that people wanted there to be a point, a driving ambition for the institution that we would articulate and work towards. And so here, that vision is articulated in this statement. Then there is the mission. The next slide, please, Keith. Queen's is the university for the future. This is the section of the framework in which, in a sense, we negotiate that complex relationship we have with our own history as an institution. We stand on a history of strength, but are unafraid to challenge assumptions of the past. We offer an exceptional student experience, attract and cultivate excellence and leadership, and push the boundaries of knowledge through research in service to an inclusive, diverse, and sustainable society. And this mission statement attempts to capture some of the recurring themes of the conversation. In particular, that forward-looking desire to associate the university with a progressive vision for society and for the planet, and to do so through the conventional avenues that allow a university to have impact, obviously through teaching and learning, through research, and so on. So then we can move on to values. The framework articulates our values as an institution in this way: truth, responsibility, respect, freedom, and well-being. And under each of these headings, there is some detail given and some expansion of the values as we understand them and as we would wish to see them shape the work of the university. We stand for truth, integrity, creativity, and the power of the mind to understand problems and find solutions. We accept our responsibility to build a diverse, equitable, inclusive, and anti-racist community for our people, to indigenize and to decolonize the academy, and in all that we do to observe the interests of the planet and the life it sustains. Then respect, believe in collegiality, civility, generosity, trust, equity, inclusion, and respect for all, and in the relevance and potential of all disciplines and professions, especially in their intersections and synergies. Freedom, they're an affirmation of our commitment to academic freedom and to the principle of university autonomy, two things never to be taken for granted. And then finally, but absolutely central to the whole vision, a commitment to well-being, that we nurture the health, safety, and well-being of our people and community. Now, the framework had a mission and vision articulated and the values described in this way, but it also included 6 strategic goals. So we'll have a look at the first of these now. Now, before I move into these, I'll just tell you a little bit about the process that ensued after the framework itself was approved in May. We established a number of working groups. There were 6 of them all in all, with chairs drawn from across the university. And their mandate was to identify 1 or 2 really potentially high impact initiatives that could be advanced in order to move the strategic framework forward under each of the headings of the strategic goals. As I work through these, I'll give you first the goal and then a quick summary, and it's of necessity a sort of selective summary of the recommendations of the working groups in each case. These, by the way, were filed in August of this year, and you can actually look at the full reports of each of the working groups on the principal's website. They're much more complicated and extensive than the one or two initiatives that I point to here. These are simply to give you a taste of what the working groups proposed. Then when I get to the end of this, I'll tell you a little bit about how that relates to the next phase, which is the phase of implementation of the framework. So the first of the strategic goals was a focus on research, increasing the intensity and volume of exemplary, groundbreaking and interdisciplinary research, whether fundamental, applied or driven through community partnerships. So although much of the thrust of the strategic framework is towards impact, that doesn't preclude or presuppose exclusive focus on the applied nature of the work that is done in the university. Obviously, universities make their major contribution to the advancement of knowledge through all forms of research, curiosity driven as much as any other kind. But what is interesting here is the inclusion of research driven through community partnership, which is a new thing for our institutional strategy. So we'll move on to the next slide, which lays out the overall recommendation of the research working group. This was chaired by Professor Parvin Musavi. And here the recommendation was on attending to the development of research at Queen's on three fronts: recruiting talented teams and individual researchers, fostering and supporting them, and then celebrating their achievements. That is the essence of what was recommended by the working group on research, but of course couched in a number of concrete initiatives, one of which, well, two of which I include here in this slide. The one to focus on grand challenges and ideas, and using those grand challenges and ideas as a way to form research groups and teams in the university so that we can respond to the big challenges that the world faces by marshalling all the expertise in our institution. And the suggestion here was that we might use the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations as a framework for this. And you'll see that as the slides progress, the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, figure quite prominently in the recommendations of all the groups. Perhaps no coincidence, because there had been much discussion of the Sustainable Development Goals during the period in which the framework was itself developed, but also during the process of building their recommendations. The chairs of the working groups did have a number of opportunities to confer with each other and to share the direction of their thinking. So as we move forward on this, we need an action champion, and you'll see in each case we've identified a champion to help lead and coordinate the university's efforts under these headings. And in this case, the obvious person to champion the recommendations of this working group as part of her overall strategy for research in the university is Vice Principal Nancy Ross. All right, so we'll move on to the second of the goals, Keith. So now we turn from research to the second key component of the life of any university, and that is teaching. And here, a commitment to advancing highly effective pedagogies, leveraging new technologies, and reconceiving educational programs of all levels and types so as better to prepare students to have impact in their chosen careers and throughout their lives. This is a subtle reorientation in which we begin to think of a transformation of our the educational experience we offer students in a way that is oriented to maximizing their capacity to have impact as global citizens and people acting upon the great challenges that face the world today. So the second of the working groups was concerned with the same question, so we could go to the next slide, Keith. And here, Eric Knudsen from the Faculty of Law was the chair of the group. And here you can see that central to the recommendation of this group was an emphasis on inquiry-based learning, some kind of transformative inquiry-based learning opportunity, being key to the educational experience that we offer to all our students here. And here you can see in the more particular recommendations, the idea of focusing at least this dimension of the student experience on a wicked idea that has importance either socially, economically, politically, or culturally, and that has impact on the lives of others in the community. And as this working group laid out their priorities, they spoke to the need to develop and advance our teaching in the university according to some of the best and most appropriate pedagogical methods. The overall aim was to instill a critical inquiry-based mind shift in student learning that can then be brought to other classes and learning experiences at Queen's. The action champion under this heading is the Vice Provost Teaching and Learning, Claudiana Colomitro. So let's move on to goal 3, Keith. So this goal picks up a theme that was important in the report on the conversation, which is the importance of strengthening the interdependence of research and teaching, of integrating a higher component of research in the undergrad experience, as well as driving up the overall research orientation at the university by increasing the ratio of graduate to undergraduate students and expanding on the opportunities here in our university community for postdoctoral fellows to be integrated in the overall research mission of the university. The intention here is to partly address our commitment on research by deepening the overall university engagement with research, something we are uniquely well equipped to do given the quality of the undergraduate students who come here. If any institution can do this effectively, inculcate research methods and an excitement for research in undergraduate students, it would be Queen's that can do that. So let's go to the working group and its report on the integration of research and teaching. Here, the chair of the working group was Professor Ram Murthy. And here, the proposal was that we make this integration of research and teaching a hallmark of the educational experience here at Queen's. And there were a number of proposed initiatives, research orientation being part of the signature Queen's educational experience. Here again, a recurring theme, the framing of research questions around wicked ideas, which might be derived from the 17 UN SDGs. And overall, building the research experience for undergraduate students from the 1st to the 4th year. And Claudiana Colomitro is the designated champion for this dimension of the strategic goals. So on to the next, Keith. This is the 4th of the goals, and this picks up a really important theme in the report on the conversation. This is the critical importance of our building our global engagement as an institution. So here, the strategic goal within the framework is strengthening Queen's presence globally, developing and implementing a comprehensive, equity-focused and integrated program of global engagement that includes active strategic partnerships, enhanced student and faculty mobility, and teaching and learning reform oriented towards a pluralistic and culturally relevant global environment. This is a vision of internationalization that would set us apart from the prevailing notion in this country and more broadly, which sees international education as a rather mercenary activity in which international students in large numbers are brought in simply to subsidize the cost of educating domestic students. What's envisaged here is something very different, and a global engagement, a form of global engagement which is premised on equity, on the notion of mutual benefit, and which by that means seeks to contribute to our realizing our ambitions under the Sustainable Development Goals. This is a very exciting dimension of the framework, and we have since 2020 been working with the International Association of Universities on our internationalization strategy. That work continues. And simultaneously with it, there was a working group led by Sandra Donata, and we can move to that description of some of the recommendations from that group. Fundamental here is this notion of reconceiving of Queen's as a global campus. A university, this is the quote from the report, in which global engagement and action is integrated through all that we think and do. And this potentially has hugely transformative experience, especially, or potential, I should say, especially when linked to the commitment to a kind of an infusion of research awareness and methodology into undergraduate learning and so on. There's some specific recommendations here that are proposed by the Global Engagement Working Group. The creation of a Global Challenges signature course that is university-wide for credit and transdisciplinary, and you might say this echoes that recommendation from the Teaching and Learning Working Group to build that kind of unique signature program into the course of study of every student. Here the recommendation is that it be very much focused on a global challenge. And then similarly, the SDGs, you can see in the second bullet here, are identified as a framework, or potentially the framework within which those global challenges might be identified. And then there are a number of other concrete recommendations for initiatives in the creation of research chairs and so on that would contribute to that realization of Queen's as a global campus. The point about this, I need to say, is to move away from the notion that internationalization is only a matter of student mobility. It is that, both outgoing and incoming student mobility. It is also faculty mobility, but it also has to do with changes to the curriculum and a new inventive kind of orientation to building global perspectives into the work of our students, even if they don't travel. All right, on to the next of the strategic goals. And this comes closer to home. This is the goal that speaks to the importance of community engagement. Embedding Queen's in our community, building deliberate, strategic, respectful, and mutually beneficial engagement with communities outside the university. In a sense, this is the same goal that we have under international, only it sees its impact as being registered much closer to home in our immediate community, including Kingston, the region, other organizations and institutions, and national and global networks that share our goals. This is a provision that builds on the notion that Queen's should be a partner with other institutions, with its community, in contributing to the greater good, rather than simply to the goal of self-aggrandizement. All right, then we can go to the strategic goal working group, and here in charge of community engagement was Elaine Powers, the chair of this group. This is an area in which there's huge potential, but also in some ways the most work to be done at Queen's. We need to develop a collaborative, interactive and co-creative partnership model of university community engagement in which the university learns from its partners and is transformed in the process. And I think this language coming from Elaine's working group is extremely welcome and summarizes, I think, very well what we would hope to see occur in the area of community engagement. In order to achieve this, we not only have to clarify for ourselves what an ethical engagement with the community looks like and should include, but we also need to understand how multifaceted it is and with how many dimensions of our community we need to interact. So we need to create a council for community engagement that will oversee this process and coordinate community engagement across the campus. So that council is in the process of being formed. I will chair it initially and will be looking forward to working with some other designated champions in this area. And then if we could go to the final of the strategic goals. And this, just as I said of wellness, when I spoke about it in terms of the framework of values, this, though it comes last in the list, is utterly essential to our success in all the 5 preceding goals. We have to live our values, our human resources, our organizational structure, The processes by which we do the business of the Academy, our culture as a whole, need to be properly aligned to fulfill our mission, and they have to exemplify those values. And in some ways, I mean, anybody who has worked in the area of cultural change knows this is perhaps the most challenging of all, not only in a university, but in any organization. But let's have a look at the recommendation of the working group here. So this working group was co-chaired by Eli Sedinsky from Student Affairs and Adnan Hussein. There were a number of recommendations that came out of this group. One of the most striking, of course, speaks to our commitments under EDII. And the suggestion there was that we develop an official inclusive culture policy with commitments to continuing actions. In other words, to build upon our declaration against anti-racism and so on, and to make this kind of commitment to equity, diversity, and inclusion utterly fundamental to the institution, suffusing everything we do. There were a number of other recommendations, for example, expanding structures and operations to recognize the value of employee resource groups, and similarly develop and implement a faculty and staff climate and engagement survey. We have done just recently a survey of student experience here at Queen's, and we need to be finding ways to acquire data about the experience of faculty and staff on our campus in order to address some of these challenges. This is a big category in which action is going to be required. And so here we have two champions, our AVP Human Resources, Steve Milan, and AVP Human Rights, Equity and Inclusion, Stephanie Simpson. Although these recommendations speak particularly for EDII, there are many areas in the university which were pointed to in the report on the conversation that will need attention if we are to succeed. Risk aversion, the ease with which information flows through the university, and so on. So that gives you a sense of the goals and some of the recommendations that have been forthcoming from the working groups as they did their work over the summer. And before I move on, I need to thank not only the chairs of the working groups, but all the members of those groups who contributed to this discussion about strategy. And as I say, the full reports are there to be read by any member of the university community on the principal's website. So Keith, to the next slide. So this answers the question of what exactly will the action champions do? There are really two components that now need to be addressed in moving the strategy forward. One is to take stock of where we are, because most of those strategic goals do speak to activities that are to some extent already underway in the university. So there are parts of the university, for example, if you're just looking at the academic side of things, in which there is and has been a growing integration of research in undergraduate learning. That is important. The purpose of the strategy is to support good work that's been done in all the areas that fall under these goals, to amplify it, but also to identify where there are gaps and opportunities that could be filled with some new initiatives. And that is, in a way, the two-sided mission of the champions, to take stock of what we already are doing that speaks to these goals, and then secondly, to lead a discussion that addresses some of the opportunities that are not covered that would increase our impact. So really important function. We're going through, and this is the second bullet here, a process right now in which units across campus, whether they're the academic faculties or administrative units in the VP Finance and Administration portfolio, units are identifying where their alignments with the strategy are to be found. This is all part of the taking stock process. And once we are clear on what alignments are most powerful in the institution with these goals, we will know how to build upon them. So this then adds up to the evolution of a fully fledged implementation strategy for the strategic framework. In a way, the combination of the higher level goals, the evidence of alignment, and the particular initiatives for new investment and a new engagement. Now, this is all very well, but let's go to the next slide, Keith. This university community has done an amazing job, it has to be said, over the last 20-some months addressing COVID. The mere fact that we've managed to come out of it with a new strategy is remarkable, that so much good work has been done on all fronts, whether it's in terms of creative thinking by staff or by faculty. We've made an amazing effort, and I think the university is in a good place. But you know, after 20 months of stress from COVID is not necessarily the optimal time to begin a new strategic direction, but we have to do it. Because one of the messages of COVID is that the landscape is shifting constantly, and we need to keep moving on the formation of strategy if we're going to succeed and be able to lay claim to the kind of prominence and effective impact that we see as the future of Queen's. So we are making right now an investment in health and well-being in the university community, and I'm pleased to have been able to make from the Principal Strategic Fund a first investment in this, which is an investment of $420,000 into designated health and wellness improvements and programming in human resources. There's much more to be done, and that investment isn't anywhere near the sum of what the university is investing or should be investing in the well-being of our community. We need to embrace this new strategy, but in order to do it, the community needs to have the energy and the creative resources to push on with it. So we're getting our house in order, building the health of the community, and also simultaneously beginning to move at a reasonable pace down the road of implementation from the strategic framework. So I'm very optimistic about where we're headed. I think it's very exciting. I was just this morning on a call organized by the International Association of Universities, and I am confident that this strategy does put us at the forefront of where universities are moving across the globe. In fact, the notion of the responsible university, of universities being less concerned, as Chris Brink, who has written a lot on the subject, has said, less concerned with what we are than what we're here for, what we're here to do for society and for the planet. So the next slide, please, Keith. Part of where we're going now, so I think you've got a sense of what's going on in terms of academic planning and other forms of planning in the university to advance the strategy. We do need to communicate that this is our new direction as an institution. And so beginning in the new year, we will be mounting a communications plan to get word out to our alumni, to the sector more broadly, to society at large, about what Queen's is here to do and what our wishes and aspirations are for the future. And in particular, that orientation towards the future and towards the good of society and the planet as absolutely critical to everything we do. That is our narrative. And you can see here a slide which summarizes the direction those communications are likely to take. On to the next one, Keith. Here's the components of the narrative. So first, I already alluded to what it means to be a leading university is changing. It's the shift away from institutional attributes and outputs towards an increasing emphasis on the positive difference we make in the world. Similarly, you can see in the second component of this, we need to think about how we position ourselves, not so much as an institution with a history to be proud of, and indeed there is much of our history we should be proud of. At the same time, we interrogate it for some of its less admirable aspects, but overall the thrust is towards the future. towards thinking about how we as an institution can bring maximum benefit to the planet and people on it. And that, of course, is summarized in the notion of the university for the future, and that is the goal towards which the strategic vision, or strategic framework, I should say, commits us. The last point is an important one, and that is that I've said we build on our proud history, but we also question it. But one of the aspects of our history is that we have been, for 180 years of our history, an institution that has sought to build social institutions and constructs. This university has a connection with the growth of this nation, which is perhaps stronger than any other university in the country. And this new strategic framework points us in that same direction, however, with a global emphasis. This is not a program that is only attentive to a contribution we might make to the growth of Canada. It does very much want to see Queen's as a player in a global context. So I think that is the last of my slides there. So perhaps I'll leave it there. I believe, Mary Beth, we have a video we'd like to share, which is from it'll give everyone a sneak look at the communications, the external communications plan that will be launched in the new year.
It is coming. It is coming.
Queen's is an institution defined by its values. Queen's is an institution defined by its values: truth, responsibility, respect, freedom, and well-being. Everyone at Queen's, including and especially our hardworking faculty and staff, should see their contributions to this institution and know that it is through their commitment and dedication that Queen's will realize its full potential. I'm proud to be introducing Queen's new strategy for the future. This is a community-built strategy, and in it you will find the incorporation of many different voices, garnered from a broad consultation with stakeholders, both internal and external. As we roll out the strategy and begin its implementation, faculties and departments across the campus will see and find alignment with the strategic goals. And together, with help from university champions who will ensure we move the strategy forward, we will bring the strategy to life, and we will achieve our goals. Oh, you're muted, Mary Beth.
I'm going to move into a few questions. That's okay. First of all, we have a question. What are the expected timelines for implementation and execution of the strategic plan? And do you have any metrics so that we can see that successes can be shared?
Yeah, well, excellent questions in all those dimensions. So this is, you might call this an unusual strategic planning process, because I've at no point wanted us to just stop what we're doing, reinvent it all, and then, launch according to a kind of a military sequence. What I've tried to do in thinking about the strategy is to graft it onto the normal operations of the university, so that we're, in a sense, evolving towards the realization of the strategy, rather than pausing, stopping everything, and launching a bunch of new initiatives. So hence that whole process I was talking about of alignment, in which we're working out exactly what's going on and how we can build on those good things which are already there in the framework and already there in our day-to-day practice, and how we can amplify those things and bring them into even stronger alignment with the framework as it's been laid out. So the timelines are actually very ambitious, because I think we don't have time to waste. We've had extremely effective strategic planning exercises going on in a number of the faculties, not uninformed by the discussion around the strategic framework. So already we have, whether you're talking about arts and science or engineering and applied science, we have faculties that are already in one degree or another orienting themselves to the goals and laid out in the strategic framework. So my answer to the question in the first instance is, well, it's already underway, and we're hoping that the effect of that will be that we will much more quickly reach the point at which we can be pointing to the achievement of some of these strategic goals and to the impact that we're having in the world. Now, obviously, you need metrics. You're quite right. You do need to know just how we're being effective and in what way. Each of the strategic plans in the faculties have systems of metrics built into them. And I think there's an important distinction to be made between metrics at the kind of particular departmental or faculty level and metrics at the pan-university level. So part of the process we're in right now will be to identify that relatively small number of measures or indications of success that we can apply to the whole university. We might set ourselves a timeline in which we say, how much in the way of global partnerships in support of the SDGs, how many of those would we expect to see after a year or after 2 years or after 3? So we will set some criteria for assessment for the pan-university strategy, but that doesn't mean either that the implementation of much that is implicit in the strategy or the measuring of its effectiveness is not already underway. What makes me optimistic about this as a method of proceeding is that we're trying to, through this process, bring out of the academic life of this institution what is already there in a kind of nascent form in many respects. And so it shouldn't take too long for us to not only be able to point to those things, but measure their success.
Great. We have a question from Tricia Baldwin. So given the future impact of AI that will accelerate change dramatically, what kind of importance is the university recognizing in creating lifelong learning through micro-credentialing of our alumni and community at large?
Well, Tricia, thanks for the question. It actually, it is its own answer in the sense that what you've spoken about there is an inevitable direction that this university and any other university is going to have to go. I think the understanding that the frame within which people evolve and develop as learners is now, if it ever was the case, it is now definitely not confined to the 4 years of an undergrad degree or the 6 years of an undergrad degree plus a master's degree or something like that. The whole sector does have to shift towards an understanding of learning as something which is perpetual and in which universities, as much as the people who have graduated from them, should be engaged. So we are already thinking about things like micro-credentials and in fact have garnered some government support to develop such things. And I think when that is the way of the future, grafting on to some of the existing strengths of this university, some other new directions, which have, I think, been thrown into relief by COVID. We've been forced to be quite flexible during COVID, and I anticipate that as we move out of COVID, we will retain many of the lessons we learned. And those things, I think, will connect very well with the goal of lifelong learning. I do think an institution like this has to recognize that our scope of impact is not just individuals between the age of 17 and 22, but it's on individuals throughout the whole of their lifespan and across the globe in every dimension of society.
Great. Patrick, we have a great question here for you. This person's saying, I wonder if you think to the future, how will the world look different because of Queen's impact? In other words, what specific strengths do you see here at Queen's, and how will they achieve that positive impact that you talk about in the strategy?
Well, that is a great question. Well, I'll talk about two obvious things and then comment a bit on areas of specific strengths. Really, there are, on the surface, it would seem as if there are two principal ways in which the institution makes impact. The most obvious is through the individuals who graduate from this university who have agency. I mean, what we need to be doing is graduating people with power and agency and a system of values and academic skills and practical skills that make them agents for the greater good. I think that is the first thing that we should think of ourselves as doing, and that's obvious. Then again, through our research, it's the same thing. Whether research is curiosity driven and has no apparent immediate impact, or whether it is very much oriented to immediate impact, both of those things are critically important, because it is often the curiosity driven insight which 20 or 30 years down the road leads to a discovery that does have transformative impact. So research is our other potent tool for, in a sense, carrying what Queen's has to offer to the point at which it has impact in the world. But we also, and this gets to the last of the strategic goals, we have to live this. And by living it, we have local impact. I think universities historically are prone to the delusion that the most powerful impact they can have is the impact that is furthest away, right? So if you're working on poverty, it seems that it is to some extent desirable or more admirable if that poverty occurs on the other side of the globe. But in fact, poverty anywhere in the world is in need of attention, to say the obvious. And so it's by being the kind of institution we are, inhabiting this community in the right way, being a good partner with our community and so on, that we also have impact. So the force of these institutions is amazing, and we'll shortly release our economic and cultural impact study. And that only begins to touch the surface of what an institution like this is already doing, even without making that impact as much of an intentional component of what we do as I think we'd like to see it. So those are some thoughts about the means by which we have impact. In other words, through the teaching, through the learning, through the being as an institution, through exhibiting a certain set of values. But here's the other thing. When we went through our exercise for the Times Higher Education Impact Rankings, you'll recall that we assessed our strengths and we submitted evidence on all 17 of the Sustainable Development Goals. If you take the 17th out, which is collaborative partnerships for the goals, we submitted evidence of our contribution to the other 16. And we found ourselves standing first in the world on a number of those strategic goals, perhaps somewhat surprisingly. And so that's my point. I think our involvement with the Times Higher has been a way of also taking stock, to get a sense, to look at our overall operation as a university and to say, well, okay, if these are the 16 things that matter in the world, where are we contributing, where are we not? And I think the surprising result of that process for the university was how broad our contributions are. So in other words, some contributions not necessarily in areas where we thought we would have them. You know, if you look at our research output, you can see that there are certain areas, and here I think of our work in cancer, or our work on sustainable energy sources and that sort of thing. You might say, okay, these are areas of strength, but we have other areas of strength that we should not fail to cultivate. So I think we're at a stage now in which, and this is very much, I think, part of the assignment that the Vice Principal Research carries, which is looking at all of our strengths and thinking about how they can be leveraged or brought together in teams that really do maximize our impact in I suppose, a constellation of areas that matter in the globe. I think I got that's an answer to the question, Mary Beth. Although I fear I missed a bit.
You got there. So talking about impact, someone has asked, given that our local community is currently experiencing a housing crisis in affordability and supply, with so many people currently unhoused at a time when there's a COVID outbreak and it's very cold outside, in what ways is Queen's willing to support the most vulnerable in our local community now when support is so greatly needed?
Well, absolutely, that's critically important. In the early days of COVID, we did make parts of the university available to communities, say the homeless community or other individuals out who were lacking permanent homes and shelter. In the end, the city found accommodations for those people, but we continue to be open to making our facilities, where possible, available to members of the community who otherwise do not have those protections. I think it is a minimal obligation on the university to share and make use of its infrastructure where possible to support the community.
So on the staff experience front and well-being, how do you see Queen's adapting to new work models and flexibility to attract and retain talent in this current labor market?
Well, I think this is one of those dimensions of COVID, which if one puts aside the sort of the complex emotions we all feel about this sort of strange transitional moment we're in, there is huge potential for rethinking working arrangements. We've already got a plan in place for members of the university to discuss and agree upon remote working arrangements with their particular units. And I fully support that. I think we have, by COVID, been liberated from an inherited paradigm for the way in which people should understand their working relationship with the university. And so long as arrangements work for both parties, that the work of the university gets advanced and individuals' wellness and ability to contribute is sustained and supported, I think the university would be open to any and all considerations of that sort. It's a great opportunity. It's also essential. So the question mentions the challenges around recruitment. There are many areas in which it is now extremely difficult to secure the services of individuals in a number of fields. And so the opportunity for remote working is potentially one of the ways in which we might be able to get around that issue. So I mean, my view, and I think I can speak for the senior leadership team, is that we do see the importance of flexibility in working arrangements in the coming years, not just because of COVID, but because we can see that there are many ways of doing the work of the university that might, in fact, help us to manage better in an era, let's say, of difficult recruitment, various kinds of skill shortages, and so on. It's right now is a challenging phase. I mean, the recent news about the Omicron variant hangs over us in a rather ominous way. But we are on the way out of COVID, even if our emergence from it will take a little longer, perhaps, than we might expect. And it's during that period that we will be able to rethink, in perhaps a permanent way, some of our assumptions about what it means to work at Queen's and in Queen's.
Patrick. So I think we're about done for the questions part right now. Patrick, I want to give you a chance to just say a few closing remarks. I do want to let everyone know that we are recording today's session and it will be posted on the principal's website and YouTube later today or tomorrow. Patrick, do you have a few closing remarks?
Yeah, I'll keep them brief because everybody's heard enough from me today. But this is an exciting moment, and I'm really hoping that everywhere in the university, two things will happen. Individuals will take the strategic framework and translate it into terms meaningful in the area in which they work. if you look at this framework, you can see there are obvious forms of translation if you happen to be in an academic faculty, but it's not so obvious in every dimension of the university's life. But the framework does apply there, whether it's on the organizational culture side or whether it's on internationalization or whatever, or even if it's simply through paying attention to the values that we all live. Everyone needs to feel that it is their responsibility to make that act of translation. And I believe because the strategic framework arose out of a dialogue with the university, there will be that synergy at work. And so that just brings me to my second point, and that is that I hope everyone will be quick to come forward to identify themselves to the champions in each of these areas, or to me, or to any of the members of the senior team, if they have ideas for advancing the mission of the university along these lines. This is not intended to be a strategy that is thought through and fully controlled from the top. It is intended to evolve now organically as a community effort, steered by these goals, values, and mission and vision that have been articulated in this document that we developed this year. So I'll leave it there, Mary Beth. Just want to thank everybody for joining the call today and for their attention and in anticipation for helping us realize this really exciting vision.
Thank you, Patrick. This is very exciting and certainly gives us lots to look forward to in 2022. I'm now going to welcome back Nathan Brinklow to officially close our meeting. Thank you.
Yes, thank you both. When we opened our meeting, we brought our minds together in one circle for this time, and so as we close the meeting, we release that circle so we can continue on, each with our own business for the day. Zukne nu wat eet nu horlad oska se arde I de wardi one hold ungi gon when he said ade. Agwe gonska din de wahwet nu nu gwahni gura, dan a date nu horlad and wet das sua. She say go skatne yungo yot dudge ne skon and I juni. Date nu horlad and yet in stahan jo when zade she say go jagat gon hajino sagat nago sat stansra and I jun hio hage. Date nu horlad ne gat ne garunyu, she say go de wat the darhos tinu het kont gain ohan zage. Dan oska din de wahwet nu nu gwahni gura, dan a date nu horlad ne de hoti into de neha jo han zage, ne och dera sua ne hunde sua ne kwa sua ne gakwa sua, ne gahik sua den arjuna hekwa. Dan a garlunda sua gen ogwile sua, she say go rodio daje jok nago saga on hamna so quite this. Date nu horlad on she say go rodio daje. Dan only date nu horlad and hoda wade hjardos, she say go de wat gatunius, or dio daje a wange, o hanzage, dan a garunyage. Dan ci do wade nu gorla di hunto, den garunyage, dan a date nu horlad agwe, ne rodi sat stansora, ne ga sat stansorio. Ne gaieri ni gawarage, ne yuki sotogun ala diweras, ne tisota, ne tiduazia, dan yo just guardunium. Dan o de gadineo, he date nu horlad, ne ga sat stansora wana sa aviera. Oza gene songoya dison runwadi sani anderi, dan oya ni ha di ratika san ge runwadi sanum. Date nu horladun soka gwegon, skana agahage ungorhi goage. Onatuni ore wagadri wat gweni ni, toka teno ni ison get ni goha, easy gine, aiza wada sundra, dan o wagari one hodum. Tukni go wanage, dan on eto. That's it for me, and that's it. That's all I have to say. Nyawagi wahi. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Nathan. Thank you, everybody.